Linda, we are so excited to have you. All right, so Linda Breggin is a senior attorney with the Environmental Law Institute and a senior strategic advisor to the Nashville Food Waste Initiative. Among her projects is the Environmental Law and Policy Annual Review, which is a collaboration with Vanderbilt University Law School, in which students work with her and her co-instructor, as well as an expert advisory committee to select some of the most innovative proposals in the legal academic literature each year. Ms. Breggin previously served as an associate director in the White House on environmental policy, counsel to a congressional subcommittee, a special assistant in the Office of Enforcement at the EPA, and counsel to a large New York-based law firm. She's a graduate of Tulane University and the University of Chicago Law School. We are so thrilled to hear from you today, Linda, and I will just let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with this incredible group of women. I'm a huge fan of TWIG, even if I don't make it to that many early morning meetings. I do want to also introduce my colleague, Jessie Sugarman. She did a lot of work on these slides. She is a research associate at Environmental Law Institute. We have this amazing system at Environmental Law Institute where we bring in young, brilliant people like Jessie, and I think some of our other colleagues might be on the call today, and they agree to give us 2 years before they go out in the world and usually go to grad school first. So Jessie's been working on the food waste project with me quite a bit, and so I'm just glad that she could join us as well. So if we go to the first slide. So we're going to focus on food waste today, but I wanted to start with a little bit about my background, because I think it says something about the larger context in which we're all working now as sustainability professionals. So, you know, as you already heard, I started my law and policy career in the late 80s. Oh my gosh, it means I'm so old. And I really developed a classic Washington resume, right? I started in private practice at a large law firm where I did DC appellate work representing large corporate clients. I then left. I went to US Environmental Protection Agency as a special assistant to the head of the enforcement program, working on national enforcement and compliance policies under all the major media statutes, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, et cetera. I then moved over to Capitol Hill on a detail as counsel to a subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, where I worked on Superfund reform. And from there, I had the opportunity to go into the Clinton White House early in the first term in what was a newly created office called the Office on Environmental Policy, where I worked on the first environmental justice executive order, federal facilities cleanup, and helped launch an international education program called GLOBE, which is still around, which is wonderful, global learning and observations to benefit the environment. But I left at the midterm of the first of Clinton's first term when a new Republican Congress came in, and we were asked to make a 2-year commitment. And I decided I actually needed to get some sleep because I was exhausted. And the first time in my life, I actually needed to gain weight instead of lose weight because I was working all the time. And I went back to a law firm for a while, and then to this wonderful NGO that I've been with now for over 20 years. It's an international NGO based in DC, Environmental Law Institute. We call ourselves a think and do tank, meaning we don't litigate, we don't lobby, but we do research, training, publications, all to advance environmental protection. So then, as you can see, most of my professional focus at a certain point shifted to working on the local level. And I'm going to return to that in a minute. But in retrospect, that year, 1995, when I left the White House, was really an inflection point. This was when the Newt Gingrich Congress came in, and it really marked a start to, I think, the intense polarization and gridlock that we've now had for so many years. And so if you go to the next slide, as this slide shows, Congress has been unable to take action even on the existential threat of climate change, right? So you have the early 70s when some of the major statutes were enacted with bipartisan support, and you have the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments spearheaded by a Republican president, and then nothing. Right? Nothing for a long time, despite the emergence of new threats ranging from non-point source pollution to climate change, right? That were not addressed in existing law, and despite the need to update these laws, right? So if you go to the next slide, and then even when Congress finally took action on TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act, which was a statute that was universally viewed as inadequate, and industry supported, the reform at the end of the day. But then you get the pendulum swinging again, and you have new President Trump at the time basically just deciding not to implement, right? I mean, this isn't some radical, this is Scientific America, right, saying this. So the reason I bring this all up is that the work I do now on the local level on food waste and climate change isn't just because I moved here with my husband when he joined the Vanderbilt faculty, because I telecommuted for 10 years working on national, international issues. Instead, it's really because so much of the important work is happening at the local level and no longer at the federal level. So if you go to the next slide, and you all know this, but as these headlines show, inaction at the federal level really is left a void, right? Particularly on climate. And that is being filled in part by local governments, businesses, other entities. So even when President Trump said climate change is not a problem that we're going to, even acknowledge, local governments stepped up and said, you know what, we're still going to hit those treaty targets if we can, even if the president is going to drop us out of the treaty. So if you go to the next slide. And, as we well know, localities really are stepping up and taking action around the world. So I just wanted to give a little context for the discussion on food waste work in Nashville and why I'm so excited to be working at the local level, where I think we can all make progress in a way that just isn't possible anymore with the extreme polarization at the federal level. So if you go to the next slide. So I'm going to start it off with an overview of the Nashville Food Waste Initiative and then hand it over to Jesse to provide some background statistics, hopefully some ones in addition to the trivia questions, but it never hurts to hear those stats again. And then we're going to focus on some of our food waste related projects that have a policy focus. And then Jesse's going to wrap up with what households can do to reduce food waste. You go to the next slide. So this is our team of really amazing colleagues, and we're adding more. And I think two of them might even be on the call today, Jordan Perry and Margaret Batting from ELI, who are two great new additions to our team. And you'll note we have a lot of organizations involved in this initiative, which is great. It started as a pilot project of Natural Resources Defense Council, which, as you all know, is an international environmental advocacy group. NRDC picked Nashville for its food waste pilot project. ELI, my group, Jesse's group, served as the project director here on the ground for several years. And then, as many of you know, last year, the pilot transitioned to a permanent project of Urban Green Lab led by Todd Lawrence. We've been lucky enough to keep Darby Hoover from NRDC involved as a senior advisor. Basically, no one wants to leave this project. We all want to stay working on the project. So the goal of Nashville Food Waste Initiative is stated on the slide. It's to engage governments, consumers, restaurants, community institutions, and retailers in an effort to prevent food waste, rescue surplus food for those who are food insecure, and then to compost and digest what's left to help build healthy soil. If you go to the next slide, I want to note before we focus on food waste that this year actually marks a change for our project. We are branching out to do more work on zero waste generally and climate change as well. And these issues are, of course, all related, right? Food waste reduction helps with climate mitigation and moving towards zero waste, but at the same time, there are broader changes to the waste management system and infrastructure that are needed to support food waste reduction. And in many cases, food waste fits into broader efforts to address climate change. So it was just a logical step for us to branch out and work more broadly on these larger issues. So next slide. Turning back more specifically to food waste, since 2015, we've employed basically the same multifaceted approach to addressing food waste. We work along the hierarchy that Jesse's going to talk about in a minute, but we're multifaceted in the sense that we do policy development work, working with Metro on policies that address food waste, education and outreach. We do research to better understand the problem and potential solutions, and we do capacity building, helping organizations here to better position themselves to work on reducing food waste. So we're going to focus on the policy angle today because that is what Jesse and I work on the most. We also employ what Todd really calls a top-down, bottom-up approach, which is that we at Environmental Law Institute focus mainly on policy work, sort of top-down changes, systemic changes, and UGL works bottom-up on training teachers, developing curricula, educating the public. And these, of course, are not bright lines, but it's a rough allocation of responsibility for project purposes. So I'm going to hand it over to Jesse Sugarman to share some background information about food waste.
Thanks, Linda. So this is the hierarchy that Linda mentioned a few minutes ago, the EPA's food recovery hierarchy with surplus food prevention, rescue, and recycling in order of priority. In practice, these strategies are interrelated and in many cases are only separated in name. Engaging in food scrap recycling actions such as composting, for example, may have this synergistic effect of inspiring food waste prevention. But unfortunately, currently the vast majority of wasted food ends up in landfills or is incinerated. Next slide, please. So calling back to our trivia, USDA and EPA have set a food waste reduction goal of 50% by 2030. And this goal has been embraced by the last several federal administrations. And as I mentioned, Mayor Cooper also announced at a waste not cooking demonstration that we hosted with James Beard Foundation this past October, that Nashville is striving to meet this 2030 goal as well. And additionally, Nashville has a zero waste goal by 2050 outlined in the city's solid waste master plan. So these goals, plans, and initiatives help us collectively reduce waste, including food waste in Tennessee. To call back to our trivia again, we currently waste up to 40% of our food, and as we'll discuss, this is a problem for natural resources, financial costs, climate, and social justice. So yes, thanks for turning this slide there. So the Food Waste Initiative works on many aspects of food waste in Nashville that reach far beyond the city and even the state. So we'll now provide an overview of the state of food waste in the US and more locally. So as I mentioned, this 40% of food is wasted in America, up to 40%. That would be like going to the grocery store, buying 5 bags of groceries and leaving 2 in the parking lot every single time we shopped. None of us would do that intentionally. And according to a recent study published in the Nutrition Journal, the average American consumer spends roughly $1,300 per year on food that ends up being wasted. And while we waste that much food, recent census data show that 1 in 10 people in the US and 1 in 8 people in Tennessee were food insecure in 2020, meaning they didn't always have enough food to eat. And that said, we don't yet have firm figures on the pandemic's impact on food insecurity. So to give you a sense of the magnitude of this waste, less than just 1/3 of the food we throw out would be enough to feed all food insecure Americans, although there are, of course, huge logistical challenges to accomplishing that. Next slide, please. So wasting food also wastes all of the resources that went into producing it. I won't read all these statistics out loud to you, but essentially there are greenhouse gas emissions, wasted water, fertilizer, croplands, and more associated with wasted food. And nationally, wasted food is the largest component of landfills by weight, nearly a quarter. When organics decompose in a landfill without oxygen, that generates much more methane, which is of course a powerful greenhouse gas. So diverting food from landfills helps us feed our neighbors and combat climate change. Next slide, please. Now looking at food waste in Nashville more specifically, by sector, roughly 1/3 of food waste is generated by the residential sector, that is at home, 1/3 from restaurants and caterers, and 1/3 from other sources. Much of this wasted food is edible fruits and vegetables and leftovers, and we'll talk later about how you can avoid this waste. Next slide, please. So for now, going back to EPA's hierarchy, food rescue, so feeding hungry people, is the second most preferable food recovery strategy after source reduction. And as such, food rescue is a key part of the work that we do with the initiative. The graphics here show Nashville-specific data from a 2017 report by NRDC that's looking at food rescue potential. So in this maximum scenario, NRDC used its most optimistic assumptions about the amount of surplus food that could potentially be available for donation. This scenario is in addition to what's already being done. That is, NRDC estimates that beyond the donations already being made within the scope of its study, Nashville has the potential to rescue 5,566 more tons and 9.3 million more meals worth of food, closing an additional 48% of the local meal gap. They found that the sectors with the most untapped potential for food rescue and donation are the retail grocery sector, with the maximum potential to rescue over 2,000 additional tons of food each year. The healthcare sector, with the potential to rescue an additional 402 tons of food, and the hospitality sector with the potential to rescue an additional 377 tons of food each year. So now I'll pass it back to Linda to share a bit about the policy work that the initiative is doing to reduce food waste.
Great, thanks, Jessie. And I see these questions showing up in the chat, but I am not able to process that information and this information and the slides. So I'm assuming we're going to get to those at the end, Jen. Okay, great. And, again, thank you, Jessie, because it's interesting for me to actually hear those stats instead of presenting them, because I kind of experience them in a bit of a different way. And I always have to stop and go 40%, up to 40% of our food we're throwing away. I mean, I just think this is something where, generations from now we'll look back on and not be able to make sense of, right? It's just a phenomenal amount of waste. So I'm going to talk about some of our policy-focused projects. If you go to the next slide. So both Nashville Food Waste Initiative, meaning me, basically, and Todd Lawrence for this purpose, have worked extensively with Mayor Cooper's Sustainability Advisory Committee, as well as some prior mayoral committees as well. And I know at least several of you on the call today have as well. So last year, the committee produced numerous recommendations on how to reduce the city's carbon footprint. And those included a lot of food waste reduction measures, which we're going to talk about in just a second, because we're going to turn to our next project, which is the toolkit. So this is a climate action plan toolkit, essentially how to incorporate food waste into climate action plans. And the idea for the toolkit came from our committee work, because we spent so many hours researching what other cities had done to incorporate food waste into their climate action plans. And we realized that, in fact, food waste is often overlooked. So we did a deeper dive on best practices in this area, just to try to identify, what people were doing, and made up some of our own. And we just thought it was worth the investment to do this toolkit, because cities are just missing this opportunity to lower their footprints at the same time that they increase their resiliency and address food insecurity. And, as we know, cities are at the forefront of addressing all of these issues. They're experiencing the impacts of climate change. They also have very large carbon footprints themselves, and they're responsible for waste management. And food waste, as Jessie said, is on average the largest component of landfill waste. So diverting it from landfill is a good thing for a lot of reasons. And then, of course, as Jessie pointed out, food insecurity continues to be a major problem in cities. So there are thousands of cities worldwide that have developed or are developing what we call CAPs, climate action plans, and they're missing this opportunity to address several challenges at once by including food waste reduction measures in their plans. And I think, Jessie, you're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the kind of measures.
Yes, and I think Linda largely covered this slide, so we can move on to the next one, and I can provide a bit of background on the CAPs. And it was a very text-heavy slide, but to summarize, so under the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, or GCOM, over 10,000 cities, as Linda mentioned, around the world have established climate action plans. Not every municipality with a CAP is part of GCOM, but many are. And together, those cities have the potential for 2.3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent in annual greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Of the over 10,000 cities, GCOM's website currently lists only 182 US cities as signatories. And in fact, a Brookings report from October 2020 found that less than half of the 100 most populous cities in the US have established greenhouse gas reduction targets and completed baseline inventories. And of those 45, they found only roughly 1/3 are actually on track to meet the targets they established. So many US cities, including very large ones, don't have CAPs at all. Creating and implementing them is a great opportunity to address food waste for some of the reasons that Linda just laid out. And turning back to GCOM, the initiative has several requirements of its signatories, which are listed here in the slide. One of them is to develop a CAP or CAPs within 3 years of joining. And these CAPs are the core of the GCOM commitment. Their plans to mitigate climate change, adapt to and prepare for the impacts of climate change, and increase secure, affordable, and sustainable energy access. Cities must also routinely provide updates and progress reports to their CAPs, which is a great opportunity to add food waste measures to existing CAPs. Next slide, please. So we wanted to lay out here some of the major benefits and co-benefits of incorporating food waste into municipal CAPs. First, reducing carbon emissions is a direct benefit. As we mentioned, wasted food is responsible for about 4% of all US greenhouse gas emissions, the equivalent of roughly 58 million passenger vehicles. Increasing resilience is also a direct benefit. Food rescue and redistribution networks help communities overcome climate-related natural disasters, and food waste processing infrastructure bolsters resilience as well. For example, organics recycling and the increased use of compost products promote more resilient soils by helping prevent erosion, stabilize land, and reduce stormwater runoff. And then reducing carbon emissions and increasing resilience, of course, both have positive implications for public health. And reducing food waste helps reduce air pollutants beyond greenhouse gases. For example, landfills emit large amounts of pollutants like benzene, which can be harmful and even cause cancer. And for cost savings, as we discussed, huge amounts of wasted resources go into producing wasted food, and that costs money. The specifics vary across municipalities and by specific action, but to use compost as an example again, some potential cost savings include the reduced costs associated with landfill disposal and reduced demand for irrigation and for fertilizer, thanks to the increased soil nutrient and water retention that compost provides. And what's more, a full cost savings picture also, of course, includes the cost savings associated with the social and environmental benefits already discussed, such as improved public health. And then for advancing environmental justice, addressing food waste, as we've mentioned, can reduce food insecurity, which disproportionately impacts communities of color and which correlates with poverty, income, and other socioeconomic factors. Food redistribution efforts should prioritize reaching local populations that are most affected by food insecurity. And as we've mentioned, reducing food waste can also mean fewer new landfills, incinerators, transfer stations, which are disproportionately sited in low-income communities and communities of color. As previously discussed, these sites are associated with air pollution and health concerns such as benzene, methane. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk more about greenhouse gas reduction in particular and the mitigation potential of food waste related climate actions. So food waste actions in CAPs have very high theoretical mitigation potential. When you're talking about CAPs, you want to be able to quantify the mitigation, the mitigation potential of these action items to help make the argument for them. It's possible to estimate, although we didn't do that in the CAP toolkit. That might be the sort of phase 2 of this project, but the reality is that the range of ways that the actions we identify could be implemented is so great that it's difficult to come up with a specific enough number to really be meaningful. But that said, McKinsey and Project Drawdown, as you see here, have both identified waste and even specifically food waste in the case of Project Drawdown as really important. Part of the reason that waste makes so much sense as a priority action, as Linda mentioned, is that cities have a lot of control over waste management compared to other potential action items, because local governments are generally responsible for waste collection and disposal. So cities have the ability to improve and expand local organics recycling programs. And McKinsey found that waste is generally 10% or less of most cities' direct emissions, but they also estimate that concerted efforts can reduce these emissions by half or more by 2030. And generally, if you cut waste, it has a ripple effect in terms of sustainability. Next slide, please. So now looking at the CAP toolkit more specifically, the toolkit itself consists of a narrative as well as a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is intended as an easy to use menu to select options, view examples, and draw inspiration for future CAPs. The options and examples come from existing CAPs and food system and sustainability plans from cities across the US that vary in size and in geographic location. The actions we organized according to the food recovery hierarchy, as we mentioned, in order of priority. We've also developed a few categories of key strategies with the icons here on the slide to denote them in the spreadsheet. Next slide, please. So here's a sample of one action in the toolkit and several sub-actions that fit within it. As you can see, there's a column for the food waste related actions and sub-actions, a column that in the live document, which is hyperlinked there at the bottom of this slide, links to examples of actions from the existing plans listed here. And then a column with the icons indicating if the action fits within those 5 key strategies I mentioned. So here we have one strategy that fits in the incentives and funding category and one that fits in the environmental justice category. Next slide, please. So again, another very text heavy slide, but and these next 3 slides will be available if you want to.
You can just give some examples.
Yeah,
we're getting so many great questions. I think, you know, it'll be nice to have some extra time actually for some discussion.
Yeah, so in the interest of time, we can give some examples and flip through these next 3 slides a bit more quickly. But as previously mentioned, while hierarchy categories are useful, there's overlap and synergy with all of them. These overarching strategies are aimed at prevention, but have effects on rescue and recycling as well. For example, an organic waste ban incentivizes you to reduce, but also to rescue and recycle food waste. So each of these bolded bullet points is one action in the toolkit, and all of them have sub-actions. On the slide here, I've included the sub-actions for just this first action, the organic waste ban or mandatory diversion policy, to serve as an example. And then you can see in the parentheses there the various cities and localities that have included this in their climate action plan or sustainability or food action plans. Okay, and then we can move on to the next slide. So next we have the food rescue strategies, establishing centers for collecting and distributing surplus food, expanding policies and networks to support surplus food donation, and supporting local food rescue, food security, and food justice organizations that already exist in your area. I think we can go to the next slide. And then we have our third and final category, recycling strategies. Again, I won't read them all to you, but they have to do with strategies like composting, anaerobic digestion, things like that. And again, in the toolkit, all of these have these associated sub-actions, not just the supporting community composting strategy. And Linda, unless there's anything you want to add, I think in the interest of time, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, and you guys, you get the sense that they're just, it's packed full with different options for cities. And Jesse and I we didn't get to compare notes on this, but we had our research and policy group meeting for ELI yesterday. And they always start at the beginning by talking about what reports were downloaded the most. I was like, because the toolkit was the most downloaded of all of our reports last month. So I think it's a helpful tool, I guess, I hope is what that means. And if we'll go to the next slide, I'll talk about another area that we're focusing on. So I'm going to talk about our model compost procurement policy, but bigger picture, Environmental Law Institute, along with Natural Resources Defense Council, we're increasingly focusing on the importance of providing models for localities, model ordinances, model executive orders, model policies, not just best practices. And as Jesse noted, we didn't actually do implementing language in the toolkit, and that might be a next step, because what we're finding is that just even having the best practices studies out there with links to examples, you still need to translate all of that into language, right? That you can adopt as a policy or enact as an ordinance. And we've just realized working in Nashville and also with the NRDC cohort cities, they have a whole group of like regional cohorts that are working on food waste sharing lessons learned. And also just through my other work at Environmental Law Institute, that even fairly large cities like Nashville have limited staff and resources to spend on sustainability. I noticed Laurel Creech is on the call. I mean, she just does a phenomenal amount of work, and it is incredible. But she doesn't have a staff of 100 like they do in San Francisco, right? So what we're trying to do, I mean, you just can't expect people to do the research, look at the best practices, figure out what ones apply best to their city, and then, translate, then actually draft language, right? So what we're trying to do with these models is just reduce the transaction costs of taking action on food waste. And we're currently working on one right now, which is a model for requiring large generators of food waste to just report. As you know, there's sort of a trend for states and localities to start adopting diversion measures where you actually like ban food waste from landfills or, have other requirements around diversion. But there are a lot of cities like ours that aren't quite ready for that yet. You have to have the infrastructure in place. It takes a lot of well, there's a chicken and an egg problem there about the infrastructure, but we just think that this is just, oh, sorry, go to the next slide. I knew that was. So this is the one that we've done so far, and you can see sort of what the general policy is here, but the concept basically is that you're requiring municipalities to purchase compost for use in public projects when it's appropriate material to use, provided that it's not cost prohibitive to acquire. And that's like that area around cost prohibitive. That's something we spent a lot of time researching, trying to figure out, what we thought sort of would be the best approach here. If you go to the next, I think Jesse covered a lot of this, and you all know this, but there are a lot of economic benefits to using compost. And if you go to the next slide, you can see we laid out some of the environmental benefits. We love these pack slides. I know now the thing is to have like 3 words on a slide and a really cute picture, but I'm like total nerd. I like to have it packed with lots of information. So if you go back to look at the slides to remember something, it's actually there, on the slides. If you go to the next. Okay, so this is on the right, what the annotated version actually looks like. We'll have a plain version that's just sort of right off the shelf. You could just, plug and play, go ahead and use it. But then we have a version like the one on the right that has commentaries that explains certain key provisions, that provides background, and in some cases explains how a city could modify the model language to be more or less stringent, for example. And the idea here, again, is that we want cities to be able to easily adapt the policy to their own needs, their own context. With this as well, we've had a lot of interest from cities in the model, and we're hoping Nashville's going to move forward with a pilot project to test the policy in a specific construction project to determine, how it would work to adopt it more broadly. Okay, if you go to the next slide. So the last project I want to mention, I guess, isn't like really a straight policy project, but it's the Mayor's Food Saver Challenge to the hospitality sector, because it does involve the mayor. And this challenge started with Mayor Berry, and it's now continued through several mayors. And it is a public-private collaboration with the hospitality industry, trade associations, and with Nashville Food Waste Initiative. It's very simple and straightforward. Participants pick several food waste reduction measures to adopt and then report on them. The measures include measures for prevention, for rescue, for recycling of food scraps. When Mayor Cooper came into office, we did an event at Las Palmas where, that's a picture of it right there, where he relaunched the challenge. That's a photo of, I guess, me and Todd talking to the mayor. I mean, just to give you a sense of the power of something like a challenge, even when it's very flexible, and to give you a sense, like New York City's food waste challenge, you had to bring in like a third-party auditor to show that you'd met your goals. And what we learned here, we did a dialogue with chefs and restaurant owners very early on, and they basically said, you know what, if you require people to measure, if you require people to, bring in an auditor, you're just not going to get a lot of takers. Like, we got to kind of bring people along, slowly here. And so we decided to do it's pretty easy, right? You pick your measures. And just to give you a sense, Las Palmas reported at this event that it ordered 33,303 pounds less of chips the year they started to ask people if they wanted more. Right. I mean, and they did that, because of that was one of the options in the challenge. Right. So, you can make some progress here, is I guess what I'm saying. And Unfortunately, since COVID, the challenge has really been on pause because restaurants are just struggling to survive and deal with staffing issues. But we very much hope to sort of reinvigorate it soon. So if we go to the next slide, we've done a lot of fun outreach and education events in connection with the challenge, including a fairly recent event with the James Beard Foundation, the group that gives the culinary awards at Vanderbilt. And this was a waste not cooking demonstration with Henrietta Redd's Julia Sullivan. And so I put this up here because I don't know if you can see on the slide, but we've had 975 views and I really want to go for 1,000. So please click and watch it. It's really impressive. Julia's skills are just amazing. As Jesse mentioned at the event, the mayor announced that he was supporting the federal goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. So please watch on YouTube. The next slide is also somewhat related to the challenge. We are doing a series of videos with chefs talking to other chefs about how to reduce waste. I mean, one thing we have clearly found is that the messenger matters a lot. And a chef is going to listen a lot more to a fellow chef than to me. I can't even cook. So that was the idea behind here. We had done some research. We had heard that would be really helpful. So these are still in the works, but we thought we would give you a little sneak preview. If you can push the play button, Jen, I don't know. I'm hoping it'll work. This is still being refined. This is not final, but it is, again, Julia Sullivan doing a tip. Oh, I think you have to share your sound.
Yeah,
no worries.
Let me.
Yeah, no worries if you can't. We wanted just to give you a little sense. I can say as you're working on that. So this one is with Julia Sullivan, but Bianca from the Nashville Food Project, and Seema from Miel, and Deb from Etch and etc., and Matthew Bell from Gray and Dudley at 21C have all done these little videos.
Seafood production. Hi, I'm Julia Sullivan with Henrietta Red in Nashville, Tennessee. Reducing food waste is important to me because I see food production here at the restaurant every day. So reducing waste every step of the way makes our jobs more sustainable, which is in turn great for everyone. So I'm going to talk to you today about prepping food and using waste at every step of the way. We probably process about 70 to 80 pounds of whole fish a week, so it's really important that we use every pound of that. Once we remove the meat, we can use this whole skeleton in stocks and fumés that we put into soups and sauces. Once we remove the whole filet, there's a few different things we can use for it. But then what do you do with any of the trim that's left over from these perfect portions? You can turn them into ceviche, you can salt them for applications like bacalao. So we like to make sure that if we're paying for this whole fish, that we're getting use out of the whole fish too.
So we'll be sharing those in the culinary world, but they'll also be posted on our YouTube station for others to watch as well. I mean, chefs have just been great emissaries on this issue, obviously, especially with sort of the whole celebrity chef component. Manit has been amazing. We have a lot of chefs engaged in the food waste issues. So I'm going to hand it back to Jesse to finish off with what households can do. And then I'm really looking forward. I'm going to start working through the questions right now.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, so individuals and households can do quite a bit to prevent food waste and rescue surplus food. You know, as we saw in Nashville, the residential sector was one of the highest. Food waste came from the residential sector at one of the highest rates. So, you can take steps to prevent food waste at home, as well as engaging outside the home as a consumer, as a volunteer, as a civically engaged citizen. For those who are looking to volunteer, there are a number of amazing organizations working on food rescue in Nashville and around Tennessee. One way to prevent food waste without leaving your home is understanding what date labels really mean. So for example, best before, use by, and sell by are intended to predict peak quality and not food safety. The exception to this is dates on baby food and formula, which are regulated and should be followed, but generally your eyes, nose, and common sense are the best ways to tell if your food is safe to eat. And most food can also be frozen to eat later. Next slide, please. And then more specifically, SaveTheFood.com provides a whole suite of resources on how to save food and prevent food waste at the household level. This includes the Guestimator, Meal Prep Mate, tips on food preparation and storage, recipes for using food scraps in cooking, and information, further information on freezing foods and on date labels. Another handy resource is this Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook, a guide to eating well and saving money by wasting less food. The author, Dana Gunders, founded NRDC's initiative to reduce food waste and wrote NRDC's landmark report, which really brought national attention to how much food the US wastes. And then next slide, please. We have reached the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for having us this morning. We hope you'll continue to follow the work of the Nashville Food Waste Initiative on our website. Of course, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or want to follow up. And I'll turn it back to Linda now for any closing remarks you might want to make.
No, I'm just having fun going through the chat. And Laurel, yes, I should have mentioned Jennifer and Michelle. I just couldn't keep track of everybody who was on the call, but I mean, you guys are amazing and doing amazing work. And a lot of these questions I think are better answered by Laurel, but Jen, do you want to try to, do you want me to just pick, or do you want to pose some?
No, I can go through them, and we had a request to stay on this slide, so I'm going to leave it up for just another minute. First of all, huge thank you to Linda and Jesse for spending their morning with us and sharing all this really in-depth and robust information with us. So huge thank you. If we were in a room together, we would be having a round of applause. So if people want to do some virtual applause for Linda and Jesse, that was really awesome. So we do have a few questions in the chat. I wanted to start with just one of my own, which is, how is food waste defined? Is that defined as food that's meant for direct consumption that's not used, or does that include like peelings and meat bones and skin and those types of things?
Right. So the answer is it varies. In fact, we've been doing a deep dive on how you measure food waste, and more, I think there's an effort to distinguish between edible food waste and non-edible. So like the difference between a banana peel and a banana, for a long time, we just sort of grouped it all together. And of course, what we're also realizing is if you really want to try to get a handle on the rescue component, you've really got to make that distinction. So for example, there is actually an entire protocol that the World Resources Institute put together that's like 150 pages, and Jesse and I have read it all, and it does make that distinction between it's interesting because like in other countries, for example, so we have a whole chain, right? From farm all the way to households, and it also depends what country you're in terms of the waste, right? So there's big refrigeration chain issues in some countries that, for example, we don't have here. So there are a lot of definitions floating out there about, how you define food waste, but these numbers that we're giving you are grouping together edible and inedible when we say, up to 40% right now, so.
Awesome.
Because you also, another big one is coffee and coffee grounds, right?
Yes, right.
So we throw away a lot.
Great compost.
Yeah. You don't want to eat it. Yeah.
No. So we had a question. Someone said they love gardening, but they can't always eat everything they grow, and was wondering if there are Nashville organizations that accept fresh produce for donations. It looks like someone plugged the Nashville Food Project and some free community fridges. Are you aware of any other organizations that would take that food?
So this is the big problem, right? In aggregate, and it's particularly around restaurants, right? But you have lots of small amounts of food all throughout the city that could be rescued, that are in aggregate constitute a huge amount of food, right? But it's an incredible logistical challenge, right? Because you've got to figure out how to get all of that food picked up and delivered to a location, right? And so in a lot of cities, there's been success using different apps where people can go on and post food. I've got this, and someone can say, okay, I'll take that. And they can either figure out the transportation issue, or some of them have networks set up that already have volunteers that will come and pick it up. So this is a real challenge, right? So yeah, so maybe Nashville Food Project would pick it up, but you have to remember the other calls they're getting are from a grocery store saying, I've got an entire pallet of strawberries, right? So that's one of the few organizations, along with One Generation Away is another one that works both in Nashville and in the surrounding areas, that have trucks and can come and pick things up, but they're primarily going to be focused on, when Whole Foods calls them, as opposed to someone, with the garden. And sometimes the rescue mission, if you'll, bring it to them, they have trucks too, but I don't think they're going to deploy them for, smaller amounts, but you could check, with them on whether they might take something.
Yeah, I will say this isn't an organization, but even just texting your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers to see if anyone wants extra produce. We started a little neighbor chat and kind of share produce before we leave for vacation. So that can be a great outlet too.
Absolutely. And in fact, the chefs have talked to us about that, of trying to get some, and they kind of do it informally, but, a chef will end up with a huge amount of extra something. And, often another chef could use it. So, I mean, I still want to get back to trying to find an app that'll work here. We tried one at the very beginning of this project called 0% that had been very successful in Chicago, but they just didn't have enough context here to really, so it went up, but then there wasn't, it's like a chicken and egg problem, right? So there wasn't really enough food posted right at the start. And so, the nonprofits stopped going to it because there wasn't enough on it. We had started with Second Harvest Food Bank, a pilot project right before the pandemic, where Tomcats, which is the Southern and Acme and their catering company, was going to use the Meal Connect app, which is the app that the food banks talk to grocery stores with, how they coordinate around the world, or at least in the United States. And so we thought, well, that's sort of a tried and true app. Let's see if we could adapt it to this context. And so the food bank had identified some of the food pantries they work with, and we're going to let the food pantries communicate with Tomcats through the app and through, Second Harvest to see if that would work. And then that just got shut down right as the pandemic started. So I'd like to go back to looking at that as well. But I love your idea, Jen. There's like no reason we can't use these neighborhood listservs and others for that, right?
So we had a couple questions. People surprised about the small amount of food waste from K through 12 schools, and just some questions about how those numbers are measured. Did you all find any best practices for K through 12 schools to reduce their food waste?
Well, it's funny. We're actually working on a small project related to that right now on share tables, trying to, so USDA has done some work on share table best practices, but we have gotten requests from individual schools here about that. And so we want to put together a package of best practices. Actually, our colleagues at Urban Green Lab participated in a pilot project with World Wildlife, where they were doing school food audits. And if you look at our YouTube station, we have a video from one of them. It's like actually the cutest thing in the world. You have these kids dumping their leftover food and then like looking at this gargantuan thing of milk, right? But anyway, so it is clearly an issue. It's clearly a challenge. It gets tied up all as well in what food you're serving and preferences. I don't know if you saw that awful case recently that was in the paper where someone who worked at the school like shamed this little girl for throwing away something she didn't want to eat, and made her take it out of the trash and eat it because she shouldn't waste food. It's these can be complicated issues when you're dealing with individual school boards that are semi-autonomous entities around the country, but it's definitely an issue. And even if it's like a smaller sliver here in Nashville, it's still an aggregate is a lot.
Yeah, definitely. What an awful story. That is not a good way to approach food waste. We did have a question about how Nashville is doing with our targets for food waste reduction. Have we improved since that 2017 study?
And Laurel might want to jump in on this as well. So one of the challenges is doing a waste characterization study is really expensive. It's a really big effort. So I can't tell you that we have nice concrete numbers. We have much more anecdotal, in terms of, huge amounts more of food being rescued, for example. But it's something that we're really focused on, and NRDC is really focused on with all the cohort cities, is how do you develop the metrics and how do you, see if you are on track. So Laurel, I don't know if you want to hop in to add anything on that. Like, we can point to all these examples of diversion that weren't happening before, and we can measure that, and we are measuring that. We have a little system and group of people that are reporting on that. But it's not like we can then compare it to that pie chart, because it's not a full-fledged.
Is there a plan to do another comprehensive study?
I mean, not NRDC funded the first one for the most part, but with a tremendous amount of help from then Metro Public Works. I do not know. There was some done in conjunction with the Zero Waste Master Plan development. And again, if Sharon Smith is on, or Laurel, or anyone wants to jump in, but I don't know of a current plan.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Linda and Jesse, for sharing your time. I could talk about this for ages. So I don't love food waste, but I love the topic of food waste, because I'm always amazed by the stats and by all the really simple things we can do to make a difference. So
it is something that, like, everyone eats, and so everyone feels guilty when they throw away food. It's not as abstract as climate change, right? I think it really resonates with so many people. Well, we loved being here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Elaine Boyd for some TWIG updates.
I'd like to share my thank yous also to Linda and Jesse. Fantastic information. And I agree with Heather, who put in the chat, I love the half portions. That would help me save me from myself. So I love that. Yeah. Thank you both, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Women's History Month. And what a great way to start it with Linda and Jesse. So thank you for being here. And thank you all for deciding to spend your first Friday in March with TWIG. We appreciate it. We always like to start with just centering around our mission to empower, inspire, and connect women who are committed to environmental sustainability. And we appreciate each of you for helping us to reach that goal every month. We couldn't do what we do without our sponsors. So we want to give a huge shout out to all our sponsors and a thank you to our sponsor. And we'd invite all of you to join our sponsors. And there's information on our website if you or your organization would like to become a sponsor. We're also grateful for our new and renewing members. So we have several folks who have joined or renewed their memberships, and their names are there on the screen. So Kayleen, Kaya, Erin, Liza, Lori, Kim, Lee, and Reagan, thank you all. We're excited about things coming up with the Irises Book Club. So please go to our website, complete the survey, and our new leaders for the Irises Book Club, Allie Omans and Kim Bailey, are going to utilize some of that information. And Renee is so fast. She's put the link to the survey in the chat. They're going to hopefully select a book by the end of this month, and then have the first meeting in May. So please, please complete the survey. So to talk about a few of the community events that are coming up, this is an early call out for the Plant a Tree for Tennessee, which is April 23rd. By March 7th, they are asking people to go to their website and sign up if they'd like to be a pickup location. After March 7th, beginning on March 8th, you can go to their website and actually request a tree to plant in your yard. So go to their website for more information. Other upcoming events, we have the statewide annual weed wrangle, which is Saturday, and that is across the state. Go to the weedwrangle.org website and find out the locations. I know it's happening at a lot of the Tennessee state parks, but go to the website and find out the locations across the state. On Monday, March 14th, you have another opportunity to help clean and organize at Turnip Green Creative Reuse. And then on Thursday, March 24th, Tennessee Nature Conservancy is sponsoring a panel discussion on women in conservation. So go to the website for more information about that event. Toward the end of the month, Sunday, March 27th through March 30th is the 23rd Annual National Bike Summit. It's the in-person portion of this conference is in DC, but all of their major speakers are available through a virtual platform. So it's a hybrid event. Go to their website to sign up and get more information. And then an early call out for Nashville's Earth Day, April 23rd, 11 to 6 p.m. at Centennial Park. TWIG will have a table where we'll be sharing some easily adoptable sustainability practices. If you have ideas that you'd like to share with us, or if you'd like to participate with us, we'd love to have you. So please do send us an email and let us know your interest. Finally, we just want to encourage you to send us community events, job postings, information like that. You can send to us at our Tennessee Women in Green at Gmail address. And then you see listed there all the ways to connect with us on our social platforms. We really appreciate you being here today, and we wish you have a great rest of Women's History Month. And we look forward to seeing you on the first Friday in April. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye, take
Thanks so much
care.
for having us.
Great meeting.